Welcome back, time travelers! I've been dying to tell you about dinner with my mom last Thursday. It was a success. She loved my new recipes. And since I wanted to really impress her, I decided to read up on some dining etiquette. You know, like which forks to place where, and which glasses to use for what, and how to fold those napkins into those little tent-looking things. But whoa, I had no idea that if I searched for dining etiquette, there would be so much information. Did you know that there are rules about which direction to pass the food, what topics to discuss, how to dress, how to sit, even what to do with your napkin when you leave the table? Dining etiquette is pretty intense. Thankfully, my mom wasn't judging me on any of that. However, some of those realism and naturalism folks were not as lucky as me. In this week's lesson, we're going to read about some folks who are constantly being judged by the rules of etiquette. And not just dining. Their lives were dictated by a massive list of social expectations. Let's go ahead and run through our video agenda so we can get started. First up, we'll cover the Gilded Age, that time period toward the end of the 19th century, when industrialization led to enormous wealth for some people and ushered many others into America's working class. Next, you'll meet author Edith Wharton, who was raised in an upper-class New York family during the Gilded Age. She wrote about the very real conflict between personal fulfillment and social expectations. She knew it well because she lived it. You'll also learn about an author named Willa Cather, who grew up on the Nebraska frontier, and as a writer chose to set her novels amid the gritty pioneers and rugged terrain of her youth. We'll talk about the narrative elements of character and setting, and how sometimes the conflicts presented in a story are derived specifically from the characters and setting. Before you go, we'll run through your lesson agenda for the week, and then you'll be fully ready to travel back to America's Gilded Age. While the characters you'll read about this week might not seem like ordinary people, these works are still part of the movement of realism because these authors showed us that people of all social classes and all types of settings face struggles between what they desire and what life has thrown at them. These authors looked at the glamour and mystique of an idealized lifestyle and said, "Come on! Get real!" By the late 19th century, industrialization had really changed America's economy. There were some people, like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and Cornelius Vanderbilt, who had grown extremely wealthy through industries like oil, steel, finance, and railroads. But this wealth created an upper class that often tried to emulate European royalty. They lived in huge mansions, had full staffs of servants, threw lavish parties, and traveled extensively. And then there was everyone else. America ended up being divided into distinct socioeconomic classes. The working class grew rapidly, but because their wages remained low, they were not really able to achieve any social mobility. Most people fell into this working class, and then there were a lot of people of a lower socioeconomic class who lived in desperate poverty. Mark Twain and Charles Dudley coined the phrase Gilded Age to describe this time period. Something that is gilded is covered with a thin layer of gold. So why would these authors refer to this age as gilded? By calling it the Gilded Age, it's almost like they're saying that a thin layer of wealth covered the hard work and the struggles of everyone beneath it. And being prone to satire and social commentary, these authors were also being critical of what they saw as a superficial layer of wealth that masked a whole lot of greed and corruption underneath. Well, it was actually into this thin layer, this exclusive group of the wealthy elite, that the author Edith Wharton was born. Edith Newbold Jones, who we know as the author Edith Wharton, was born in 1862 to one of New York's wealthiest families. She spent her early years in Europe, where her family decided to stay until they felt the American Civil War had been fully resolved. She had governesses and private tutors and all the proper training to enter the social world of the upper class. But by age 23, she had not yet married, and in her particular setting, not being married by age 23 was cause for alarm. So, in 1885, Edith married a wealthy Boston banker named Edward Wharton. And by all accounts, it was not a happy marriage. But he was in the right social class and had the wealth needed for her to maintain her position. But for Edith, that was not enough. Edith Wharton wanted to write, and so she did. Her first book was about interior decorating, and in it, she strongly advised readers to avoid all the excess that was characteristic of the Gilded Age. But then, she turned to fiction. She went on to write over 40 novels, and one of them, The Age of Innocence, won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. You'll read a chapter from The Age of Innocence this week, and you'll read a chapter from The House of Mirth. Both of these novels, like most of Wharton's writings, critiques New York's wealthy class and the many rules and expectations that went along with being part of that group. With her brand of realism, Wharton showed that even the wealthiest people face excruciating conflicts that limit their personal fulfillment. Another realist of the time period also drew upon her childhood experiences to write about real struggles faced by real people, and her name is Willa Cather. Willa Cather was born in Virginia in 1873, but when she was 9 years old, her family answered the call to go west. They settled in the frontier town of Red Cloud, Nebraska, where Cather's father was a businessman dealing in real estate and insurance. However, all around them, hard-working pioneers staked their claims and worked the land. Many of those pioneers were immigrants who dreamt of building a better life. The vast frontier and the rich cultures of its people fascinated young Willa. And as an adult, Willa Cather went to college, became a journalist, and left Nebraska. However, when she began to write fiction, her characters and settings were derived from the place of her childhood. You'll read from My Antonia this week. This highly acclaimed novel about a family of Bohemian immigrants on the Nebraska frontier is based on some actual people Cather knew in Red Cloud. Real people with real struggles, but very different from the people and struggles you'll find in Wharton's work. Which brings us to our discussion of character and setting. Character and setting are two basic elements of any narrative. This week, look for both direct and indirect characterization to help you understand who these characters are and what they truly want. Pay attention to how these authors describe their settings. They're both known for being very purposeful and detailed in developing their settings. Wharton's New York socialites and the environments in which they operate have very little in common with Cather's Nebraska settlers. Still, each group faces a set of conflicts. You know, internal conflicts like character versus self, and external conflicts like character versus character or nature or society. As you read, think about how the particular characters and settings each author develops influence the conflicts in the story. What types of conflicts are faced by wealthy New Yorkers, and what kinds of conflicts are faced by immigrants on the Nebraska frontier? What conflicts exist in one environment or among one particular group of people that just don't exist among the other group? Hold those thoughts about conflict and listen for them as we run through our lesson agenda. Okay, you know the routine. After this video, go ahead and get started on your PDF readings and activities, and then do today's online practice. On days 2, 3, and 4, continue your PDF readings and activities and your online practice. On day 5, answer the reflection questions, and then, here it comes, write a brief essay that examines the way characters and settings influence conflict in a narrative. You know, last week in The Open Boat, the ocean setting obviously facilitated a character versus nature conflict. And in A Pair of Silk Stockings, Mrs. Summers' characterization set up her internal conflict. As you read the works of Wharton and Cather this week, think about the ways their very particular characters and settings are the catalysts for narrative conflict. Don't forget the quick refresher writing practice, and then you'll finish up with the online assessment for this lesson. Okay, you're all set for another journey to the time of realism and naturalism. Remember to mind your manners when you visit the Gilded Age, and be prepared for some hard work on the Nebraska frontier. Okay, it's time for me to say goodbye. Is it proper to wave? Or do I bow? Or do I say a polite farewell? Yeah, I need to find that etiquette book. See ya!